Hi everyone, in this video you will learn how you can create your own custom chatbot and then deploy it to a website. So this is the end result that we're going to build, and here we can open and close this chat window with this nice little animation, and then we can talk to it. So I can say hi, and then I get a greeting response as well, and I can ask, what do you sell? And then we get an answer. We sell coffee and tea. Can I pay with PayPal? And then I get an answer. We accept most major credit cards and PayPal. And I can say thanks, and I can also say bye. And yeah, so in this example, I trained this to be like a chat support for a e-commerce website, but you can customize it to whatever you want. And yeah, so this is what we're going to build, and we use Flask for this as the backend. So right now this Flask app is running here in the background. And for the front end, we also use JavaScript this time. So this is the first time I'm going to use JavaScript on my channel. So let's do this. All right, so I already prepared some starter files for you, and you can find the link to this GitHub repository below the video. So this chatbot is based on a previous tutorial series that I did. So you can also find the link to this in the GitHub repository. And in this video series, we learn how you can create a chatbot from scratch with PyTorch and NLP. So if you're interested in this, you can check this out. And now in this video, we build on top of this, and then you learn how we can integrate this using Flask and also JavaScript. And there are two deployment options we can use. We can either use this just to use a single Flask app where we use Jinja templates, and then all of this happens internally. Or we can just build a Flask REST API, and then we can create a completely separate HTML and JavaScript website that then talks to this API. So you can deploy this completely separate from the Flask app then. And there are just minimal changes you have to do for these two approaches. So I will show you what you have to change in the end. And now let's start by setting this up. So now all we have to do is follow the setup instructions. So you want to clone the repository, of course, and then cd into it. So I already did this. And then you want to create a virtual environment with these commands. So let's do this. Let's head over to this, to my command line. So in here, this is the starter repository. And now I'm going to create a virtual environment, and then I activate it with .venv-bin activate. So by the way, on Windows, the command might be slightly different, but I'm sure that you can figure this out. And now we are in our environment. So you can see this here in my terminal. And now you want to install all the dependencies. So we say pip install, and we need Flask, then we need Torch, Torch Vision, and NLTK for the natural language processing. All right, so this is done. So now you also might install a NLTK package that is called Punkt. So we want to start Python by saying Python. Then we can import NLTK and see if this works. And then you want to execute nltk.download Punkt. And then this will install this Punkt package. So in this case, it's already up to date. And now we can train our chatbot. So we go over the file structure in a moment where I explain how this is going to be trained. So for now, let's quit our Python application program again. And now we say python train.py. This will start the training and will take a few moments. And now it's already done. So now it says training complete. So now we can start talking to it by saying Python, let me check this again, Python chat.py. And now with this command, we can start talking to it in the console. So here I can say hi, and then I get hey. I can also ask, what do you sell again? and I get we have coffee and tea. And if I type quit, then it will exit. So this works. So now our chatbot is trained and ready to be integrated. So now we can open our editor of choice and start coding our Flask app. All right, so here I have the starter repository open in my editor, and now we will go over the file structure very briefly, and I will explain you what everything is doing. So first of all, we have the model.py. So this is our PyTorch model. This is a simple neural network with a few linear layers. Then we have nltkutils.py, where we have some utility functions to work with natural language. Then we have our train.py. So here happens our PyTorch training loop to train the model. So this is what we just did. And this will then dump the data.pth file. So this is our trained model. So all of this I explained in this tutorial series. So you can learn more about this if you check out these videos. And now, so after training, we can use this chat.py. And in here we load our model again, and then we have one function, get response, where we put in a message and then we execute our model and then we get the response back. And then so like this, we can talk to our chatbot. So yeah, these are the important files, and the way you can customize your chatbot is with the intents.json file. So you can modify this however you want. But you need to keep this structure. So you define different intents here, and each intent has a tag. So for example, the tag greeting. Then you put in different example patterns for a greeting. For example, hi, hey, how are you? These are all greetings. And then you define possible fixed responses that the chatbot can then choose if it detects that this is a intent with the tag greeting. And then it randomly selects one of these responses. So you can modify this to whatever you want to do with your chatbot. And yeah, so these are all the important files for the chatbot. And now to deploy this, we have to implement the app.py file. So this is where we start coding our Flask app. So before we do this, I also already put in some starter files for the template and some static files for the JavaScript file and also the CSS for the styling. So you have the base HTML. This is just the base template that we need. And then we have a JavaScript file. This is also empty, so we have to write this as well. And so the styling is also already done for you, so you can simply get this from the repository. So now let's start coding our Flask app. So first of all, we say, of course, from Flask, we want to import Flask. Then we also need the render template function. We also want to have the request, and we want to have JSONify to return a JSON response. Then we also say from chat import get response. So this is what I showed you in this file. So here we have this one function where we put in a message and then we get back a response. So this will return a string. And now, like always with Flask, we set up our app by saying app equals Flask and with the convention underscore name. And now we want to define two routes. So we define a index get route. And so here we simply return render template where we return our base HTML, base.html. And we also have to decorate this. So here we say app dot, and this should be a get request. So you can say get and then just a /. And by the way, this syntax is new in Flask 2.0. So make sure that you used Flask 2.0 or newer. Otherwise, you have to use the old syntax where we have to say app app.route and then just the /, and then here we also have to define the allowed method, so we can do it like this: methods equals, and then as an array or as a list, here we say get. So this is the old method, and if you use Flask 2.0 or newer, then we can simply do it like this. So yeah, here we have only one homepage that renders our base HTML. And then also we want one route to do the prediction. So let's create another function and create this, I call this predict. And here we want to make this a post request. So here we say app dot, and now this should be a post request. And the route that we are going to use, we use / and then predict. And now let's implement this. So this is also straightforward. So we get the text by saying text equals, and then here we get our Flask request. And then here we can call the get JSON function. And then in our JSON, we define this is called the message. So you will see how we set up this later in JavaScript. So now we have the text, and then we simply have to call the function where we call our model. So what I'm not going to do here is to do some error checking. So check if text is valid. So here I just assume this JSON is valid and our message is valid. So you can do this yourself. And then we say response equals get response from our text. And now we have to put this back to the user. So we have to JSONify this. So we say our message equals, and now we create a dictionary with the key. Let's call this is the answer, and then here we put in the response. This is a string, and then we say return JSONify our message. And yeah, this is basically everything we need for our Flask app. So now we can also say if name equals and then underscore main, and then we can start our app and test this. So we can say app.run, and we also want to say debug equals true for testing. And yeah, so this is everything we need for the app.py file. And now let's start running this and see if this works. So now we see that our Flask app is running at localhost port 5000. So now if we go to this website, we see this that there's almost nothing in there. So here in the bottom right, this is our chat window. But right now, if we click on this, then nothing will happen because right now this is not yet connected to our JavaScript. So, but this works. Our app is up and running without errors. So let's continue. Okay, so now we have to implement the app.js file. And before we do this, let's go over the structure again briefly. So the way it works is that if we go to our homepage, then we render the base HTML. So if we have a look at the base HTML, here we simply have HTML code where we have a head and then a body, and here we define our chat window. And these classes are important. So these are important for the CSS, for the styling, and also for the JavaScript later. So you will see what I mean in a moment. And to include the styling, so the CSS, here we use this typical syntax with the double curly braces and then the URL for function. And this is in our static folder, and then this is the file name. So like you can see here, I already have this static folder, and then here I have the static CSS and the static JavaScript. So this is how our CSS is connected. And then after our HTML code down here, we have this still within the body tag. we have these two script definitions. And the first one is a little trick that we know that this is our script root. So you will also see what I mean when we do this in JavaScript. And the second one is the script definition to include our app.js file, again with this URL for function. So yeah, this is how everything is connected. And yeah, by the way, if you want to run this completely separate and not as a Jinja template, then this is basically still the same HTML code, except that here we can include this the normal way without this URL for syntax. And I also show you how this code looks like at the very end. So yeah, so now all we still have to do is implement this app.javascript file. So let's do this. So let's create a class in JavaScript and call this chatbox. And in here, first we want to create a constructor. So let me simply copy and paste this so that it's quicker. So we define a constructor, and in here we define different arguments. So we want a open button, a chat box, and a send button. And here we use this document.query selector. And then here we use these different selectors. So we have the chatbox __ button, the chatbox support, and the the send button. And these selectors refer to the class names we used in our HTML. So here you can see we have this chatbox _ support. So this means then we get this whole div with this class name. Then we also have these chatbox, let's go back again. We have the chatbox button and the send button. Here we have this button or this div with the button, and this is our chatbox button. So this is to open and close the whole chatbox. And then here we have the send button. So this is to send the messages within our chat window. So yeah, this is how we access these. And then we define a state if our chat box is open or closed, and in the beginning it's closed. And then here we have an array to store our messages. Then we create one function to display the messages. So again, I simply copy and paste this in here and go over this code now. So we have one display function. Then here we extract our arguments, and then we add two event listeners by calling add_event_listener. And we listen to the click event. And when we click on the open button, then we want to execute this function. So we call this toggle state. And when we click on the send button, then we want to send a message with this function. So we have to implement these. And then for convenience, I also listen to the key up. So basically, here we also listen to if we hit the enter button, and then we also want to send a message. So now we have to implement the toggle state and the onSend button function. So let's do this. First of all, let's implement the toggle state. So here we toggle the state. So the state is now not state. So if it's true, then it's false, and vice versa. And now here we simply add or remove this chatbot active class. And this is then defined in our CSS file. So if we search for chatbox active, then here we see that if this is set, then our opacity is 1, and otherwise our opacity is 0. So now this is not visible. So yeah, this is the toggle state. And now here we define our onSend button. So let's go over this. So here we extract the text from the user input by using this query selector. Then we check if our text is empty, and if so, then we simply return, and otherwise we continue. Now we want to send this message to our chatbot. So here we define a dictionary where we put in the name is user and the message is text. So in JavaScript, this is not a dictionary, this is called an object. And this message key must be the same that we accessed then in our Python code. So in our app.py here we extract the JSON and then we call get message. So here we have the same key, so be careful here. Then we push this object to our messages array that we store internally here. And now we want to send a post request to this endpoint. So if we hard code this, then it's at our localhost 5000/predict. So again, remember here we defined our predict function with the route/predict. So we use the same here. And we can use this little trick with the script root. So this is just a variable that we defined in our HTML. So yeah, you just put this snippet here and then you can know your script root. So then you don't have to hard code your localhost like this. And yeah, so now we also define this is a post method. Then we stringify this to a JSON object. Then we want to allow cross-origin resource sharing. And again, we specify this is JSON. And this might not be important here if you just use this internally in your Flask app. But if you deploy your Flask app separately and then call this from any website, then you have to allow this. So you will see this in the example at the very end where I simply use a completely separate HTML file. So yeah, just put this here and then you're good to go. And then, so after sending the post request, we wait for the response and we get a JSON back so we can extract this JSON. And then here we want to send the message back to the user. So we want to display it. So here we again define a object. Here we say, now this time it's the name Sam and the message is the answer. So here again, we call answer. And if we have a look at the Python file, then here we use the key answer for our JSON object. So again, this has to be the same. And then we push this message back to our array again. And then we want to update the chat text. So this is going to be a separate function. And otherwise, yeah, we simply catch an error and then return or show nothing. So now all that's missing is the update chat text function. So let's implement this here. So here we define our function. And here what we have to do is we want to go over all these messages and then we modify the inner HTML code by checking if this is our user or our chatbot. So if this is the name Sam, this is the name of our chatbot, then we modify this class. We call this item visitor. And otherwise we modify this class. So this is the item operator. And then we create our new HTML text and then we set the inner HTML. And yeah, so this is all we need for the JavaScript. So now that we have implemented this, we can go back to our app and actually we can also go back to our localhost 5000, since this is in debug mode and hot reloading, this should work. So now if we click on this, then it's still not working. And this is because in our JavaScript file, so here we defined the class, but then of course we never used it. So down here we have to create an object. So we say const chatbox, and then we create a new chatbot object, and then we want to say chatbot.display, and the display function will initialize these event listeners. So now if we go back to the site and click on here, then yeah, now it's working. So let's start talking to it, and hi, and we get the response. So let's ask, what do you sell? And yeah, so this works. If we have a look at the logs from our app, then we also see that the predict endpoint is working. So yeah, basically that's everything we need. So now we have set up our Flask app. And now I want to show you one more thing. So what we have to change if we want to run this completely separate. So to run this completely separate and not within Flask itself as a template, we have to allow this cross-origin resource sharing that I mentioned in here. So in our JavaScript, we have to allow this. And then in our Flask app, we also have to set this up. And in Flask, we can do this by installing another simple package. So we say pip install, and then this is called Flask-course. And now here we install this, and then we have to import this. So we say from Flask course, we import course in capital letters. And then after setting up our app, we call this. So we say course app. And now this is everything we need to allow cross-origin resource sharing. And now, yeah, so basically we don't need this anymore. So now we simply need our post route, so the predict route. And now we can again run this. And now this is running in the background. And now I will open a completely separate front end. So now here, our Flask app is running in the background. And now here I have a completely separate front end. So here we just have HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and our image. And now the only difference is that in the HTML code, we can use the normal syntax and simply include this with the normal href. And the same for our app.javascript. And then in our app.javascript, so in here in this case, I hard-coded now the route. So this is the localhost 5000/predict. And now if I start this front end, so I can click on go live here, this will open my browser, and then I can open the base HTML. And now here, this should work. And if I say hi, then I get a response. And now if I have a look back at my backend, then here you see we get this predict post request, and it returned 200. So this works. And yeah, so again, in order to make this work, you have to allow this cross-origin resource sharing. Otherwise, this will throw an error, or it will say that this is not allowed. And yeah, that's why you have to set this up as well if you want to have this completely separate as backend and front end. And again, I can put the separate front end code in the GitHub repo as well. And yeah, so this is everything we need. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and then I hope to see you in the next video. Bye.